However, Jesus wasn't the only prophet at the time. In the small town of Mecca, a nomadic tribe called the Quraysh gave birth to a man who would change the religious world yet again, Muhammad. Muhammad was orphaned at an early age and was raised by his grandfather and later his uncle. As he grew up, he worked as a merchant, which earned him the nickname Al-Amin, meaning the trustworthy. On one of his pilgrimages in 610, Muhammad meditated in a cave on Mount Jabal Nur. The angel Gabriel appeared and relayed the word of God. Recite in the name of your Lord who creates a man from a clot. Recite for your Lord is most generous, became the opening verses of Surah, chapter 96 of the Quran. At first, Muhammad was reluctant, not knowing how to disclose this information. However, soon enough, Muhammad began to gather a small following, which was mocked by the pagans of Mecca. However, when Muhammad denounced idol worship, the leader of Mecca knew that he was through. So through the resistance from Mecca, Muhammad and his followers were eventually forced to emigrate to Medina, a city 260 miles away. There, Muhammad was instrumental in ending various civil wars, creating a prosperous Muslim community. Nevertheless, this prosperity would be challenged by the members of Muhammad's old tribe, the Quraysh and their allies, who marched up to Medina with a large army to attack the Muslims. Muhammad devised a plan that they could defend the city if they dug a trench around its perimeter, making it near impossible for enemy forces to penetrate. For several weeks, the Quraysh tried to break through the trench, trying and trying yet again. Eventually, strong wind and heavy rain caused the Quraysh forces to abandon the siege, marking the Muslims as victorious. In 630, the Muslim army marched into Mecca, taking the city with minimum casualties. Muhammad gave amnesty to the enemy leaders who once opposed him, converting most of the Meccan population to Islam. At the time of Muhammad's death, the Muslims had successfully united the Arabian Peninsula under the banner of Islam. After Muhammad's death, a series of caliphs or leaders took over the leadership of the Muslim community, beginning with Abu Bakr, a close companion of the Prophet. Under the leadership of the caliphs, the Muslim community continued to expand its territory, conquering new lands and spreading the message of Islam. At first, Abu Bakr had his eyes set on the Byzantine Empire's provinces of Syria, taking over the crucial cities of Damascus and Jerusalem. Then in 636, the Arab forces invaded the Sassanid Empire, taking over their capital city in 637, marking the end of the Sassanid Empire. Onward to Egypt they went, where after years of fighting, they successfully defeated the Byzantine to take over the city of Alexandria in 642 AD, economically crippling the Byzantines. By 716, the Arab forces had conquered much of North Africa, Carthage, and Spain, so that by 716, the Arabs had an extensive empire from Lisbon to China. After consolidating their hold on the Iberian Peninsula, the Arabs launched raids into neighboring Francia, modern-day France. In 732 AD, they launched a significant invasion to expand their territory northward. The Arabs' forces, led by Emir Abdul Rahman al-Ghafiqi, quickly conquered several cities in the region, including Bordeaux and Tours. However, Charles Martel, the military leader of the Franks, assembled a large army to meet the Arabs in battle. The battle of Christianity versus Islam. Both empires wanted to keep their own faith. The Arabs wanted to impose their religion onto the Franks. The two forces clashed near Tours on October 10, 732 AD. The battle was fierce and lasted several days, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. In the end, though, Charles Martel and the Franks emerged victorious, and the Arab forces were forced to retreat back to Spain, ending the massive expansion of the Arabic Empire. While in the West, the definition of God was war. In China, during the rule of the Tang, religions like Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism all coexisted peacefully. A citizen was able to believe what they wanted to believe, leaving for many temples and pagodas to be built across the empire. Also, during the Tang, the height of Chinese poetry was upon us. Poets like Li Po and Du Fu created poems that later became the foundations of Chinese literature. Li Po wrote a poignant poem called Zanzan on the Qingthing Mountain, translated by Sam Hamill. The birds have vanished down the sky, now the last cloud drains away. We sit together, the mountain and me, until only the mountain remains. Charlemagne, also known as Charles the Great, became the king of the Franks in 768. Charlemagne was a skilled military leader who expanded the Frankish Empire through successful campaigns. He conquered much of Western Europe, including modern-day France, Germany, Italy, and Spain. Charlemagne was also a devout Christian and worked to spread Christianity throughout his empire. In 785, Harun was declared caliph instead of focusing on conquering like his brethren. He instead focused on the scientific growth in the new capital city of Baghdad. Harun al-Rashid wanted to create the House of Wisdom, a library and research center that attracted scholars from around the world. These scholars would come to the House of Wisdom with the desire to learn. They've translated the works of the past, as well as developing the science of algebra, chemistry, sociology, and the concept of infinity. While the Vikings had a different idea of progress. The Vikings were a group of uncivilized pagans from modern-day Scandinavia who wanted to gain material wealth. So June 8, 793 AD marked the beginning of the Viking Age in Europe. Lindisfarne was a small, isolated island off the northeast coast of England that was home to a famous monastery and considered one of Europe's most important centers of learning. On the day of the raid, a group of Viking warriors, likely from Norway or Denmark, landed on the island and attacked the monastery. The Vikings pillaged the monastery, killing many monks and taking others as slaves. The raid was a brutal and unexpected attack on a place of great religious and cultural significance, and it sent shockwaves throughout Europe. In 799, in Rome, Pope Leo III was attacked by a faction of Rome who believed that the Pope was guilty of tyranny and serious personal misconduct. So Pope Leo III ran away to the Frankish kingdom. After this, Charlemagne and his Frank army provided an escort for the Pope and restored him to the papal office. But yet, the power of the papacy was being questioned, with many people wanting it to go away, which caused Charlemagne to go to Rome in late 800 to fight for his Pope. For his loyalty, on Christmas Day in the Basilica of St. Peter, Pope Leo III placed a crown on Charlemagne's head, declaring him the new Holy Roman Emperor, creating a new Roman Empire, the Holy Roman Empire, or at least the first rendition of it. Under Charlemagne, the foundations of a genuinely great empire were forming, but once Charlemagne died in 814, the new empire was bludgeoning with problems. His son, Louis the Pious, 788 to 840, inherited an empire filled with problems. Many of his own citizens viewed him as a strong Catholic who was well-intentioned but was incredibly weak and unable to do anything. As the Vikings continued their raids along the Rhine River, attacking Holy Roman Empire cities such as Cologne, Trier, and Mainz, raiding various Catholic monasteries, and destroying religious artifacts caused fear and hatred among his citizens. Why would anyone trust a leader if they can't stop barbaric pagans? So, various local leaders started to focus on defending their land rather than relying on the central government for defense, hence beginning the process of independently recreating the Chinese system of feudalism. At this time, people would willingly farm on lands, giving up their freedom to these local leaders to protect them from the Vikings, creating the basis of a new system of feudalism. While the Holy Roman Empire might have been fighting with the Vikings and the Byzantines were fighting with the Arabs, in 820, a group of Arab raiders landed on the island of Crete. Over the next several years, Arab forces gradually gained control of the island, overcoming the resistance of the Byzantine defenders. The conquest was completed in 827, and Crete became part of the Arab Empire. The conquest of Sicily and Sardinia followed a similar pattern. In 827, a large Arab fleet landed on Sicily, and Arab forces quickly gained control of much of the island. They then moved on to Sardinia, which fell to the Arab invaders in 828. In the Holy Roman Empire, once Louis the Pious died in 840 AD, so did the Charlemagne Empire. The infighting between family members grew, leading to the Holy Roman Empire being divided between three family members in the famous Treaty of Verdun. In the west, the formation of the West Frankish Kingdom was given to Charlemagne's grandson, Charles the Bald. in modern-day France. In the East Frankish kingdom was given to another grandson, Louis the German, which was obviously settled in modern-day Germany, while the Middle Kingdom was given to Charlemagne's eldest son, Lothair. However, being squeezed in between the West and East Frankish kingdoms gave the Middle Kingdom a short lifespan and was practically irrelevant. The Vikings weren't just a problem for mainland Europe, they were pillaging everything in mainland England. So in 871, the new king of Wessex, Alfred the Great, rose to power with one thing in mind: keeping everyone safe. Alfred built a network of fortifications known as burhs, designed to protect his people from Viking attacks. He also developed new military tactics and strategies and fostered alliances with other Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. Unlike in Great Britain though, the Vikings were actually invited to Russia. According to Russian legend, the tribes in Russia were tired of dealing with political strife, so they invited the Varangians, a sect of Vikings, to establish order and a government over there. Hence, Rurik came with his two brothers to the city of Novgorod, and using the Vikings' famous force, they were able to establish order in the city, declaring Rurik as their new king, creating the Kievan Rus dynasty. Under the military leadership of Oleg, one of the Rurik kingsmen, the Kievan Rus started establishing Smolensk and Kiev in modern-day Ukraine, creating the forefront of Russia today. While back in England, expanding upon his grandfather Alfred the Great's alliance network, Athelstan was declared King of Essex. Athelstan was able to get all the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms to work together to fend off the Vikings of the British Isles. He was declared to be the first king of England due to his ability to navigate alliances and keep everyone safe, beginning one of the longest monarchies in human history. While the East Frankish kingdom was facing a similar problem, the pagan Magyars were attacking everyone across the kingdom, leaving the kingdom to live in fear. However, King Otto of the East Frankish Empire was able to defeat the pesky Magyars at the Battle of Lechfeld in 955. Then, in 961, he could fully conquer all of the kingdoms of Italy, restoring Christendom to all the former pagans. So in 962, Otto I was coronated to Pope John XII in Rome to be the new Holy Roman Emperor. In France though, the West Frankish kingdom was struggling, because in 987, King Louis V, a direct descendant of Charlemagne, died at age 20 without leaving an heir to take over their dynasty, leaving the French monarchy in peril. So the French aristocracy had an election between Hugh Capet, a noble with extensive lands in the region of Isle-de-France, and Charles, Duke of Lower Lorraine. With the support of Adalbero, the Archbishop of Reims, Hugh Capet became the first king of France, starting the Capetian dynasty. However, at this time, the typical person in Europe was always living in fear. Every civilization was on the verge of conquering. They've all become land-hungry and were willing to fight for it. So across Europe at this time, every civilization started to entrench their society in the ideas of feudalism, leading to another social pyramid. At the bottom lay the serfs. Their job was to farm the land and ensure everyone was fed. Then came the knight, who provided protection for the people. Then came the nobles, who ruled over a specific territory, owning the land. Then came the kings, as previously mentioned, who gave lands to the nobles. But all the way at the top was the Pope, because the Pope could speak directly to God and had God-given ownership of all the lands. In the early 11th century, Leif Erikson was sent on a voyage to discover lands west of Greenland. If you look at a map, west of Greenland is the Americas. So Leif and his crew ventured to this new mystical land called Vinland, in modern-day Newfoundland, Canada. Leif and his crew spent the winter in Vinland, establishing a small settlement and trading with the local indigenous people. They also explored the surrounding area, which they found rich in natural resources, including timber, fish, and game. Leif and his crew returned to Greenland in the spring, where they were greeted as heroes for discovering new lands. Little did Leif know that he discovered a new continent for his European people. Though significantly less is known about the Americas, some historians believe that at the time, a similar type of expansion happened in the American continent, like in Europe. Sadly, we just don't have the historical records from this unique period. We know that the Mayans down in South America were building the impressive cities of Tikal, Palenque, and Chichen Itza, having a population of anywhere between 2 and 10 million. We also know that there were various tribes across the north, including the Cherokee, the Navajo, and the Inuits. The Inuits are most likely to have interacted with Leif's fleet. While back in Europe, in the holy city of Jerusalem laid the very famous church, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. According to Christian belief, this church was built on the day Jesus was crucified and resurrected. However, in 1009 AD, Arab Caliph al-Hakim ordered the destruction of this sacred holy site. All of the sacred sites were destroyed, leaving them completely annihilated. When the news reached Europe, Christians were horrified. Pope Sergius IV sent a circular letter to all churches, calling for a holy fight in the Middle East and the expulsion of Muslims from the Holy Land. But yet the Arabs of the Abbasid Caliphate would actually be expelled by another before Jerusalem. The Seljuk Turks, a Central Asian Turkic people of the Muslim faith, were beginning to grow their empire. In 1055, they took over the Abbasid Caliphate capital city of Baghdad. The Seljuk Turks initially respected the caliph, but the Seljuks took over the city over time. In 1076, they captured Medina, followed the next year by the capturing of Mecca, the holiest city in Islam. Due to this, the Muslim world wasn't ready for Pope Urban II at the Council of Clermont in 1095 to call upon all Christians to take up arms and liberate the Holy Land from Muslim rule. The Pope promised spiritual rewards and forgiveness of sins to those who joined the crusade, and many knights, nobles, and peasants were inspired to take up the cause. Many European nobles, such as Godfrey of Bouillon, Toulouse, Bohemond of Taranto, and Robert of Flanders, brought their armies from Europe on their journey to Jerusalem. While the Christians were united, the Muslims were divided and unable to put up a strong defense against the Crusaders. Hence, the Christians took over the county of Edessa in 1098, and finally the holy city of Jerusalem in 1099. However, the crusade wasn't done. In 1144, the Muslim forces led by Turkish ruler Ahmad ad-Din Zengi launched a siege against Edessa. The city was poorly defended, and the Crusaders could not resist the Muslim forces for long. After a siege of several weeks, the city was breached, and the Muslim forces overran the city, killing or enslaving much of the population. But the Christians weren't happy with that, so in 1147, the massive armies of Europe came back with attempts to free Edessa. The Crusaders faced significant logistical challenges, including shortages of food and supplies. They were also plagued by infighting and political rivalries, which called the campaign to be in ruin after the disastrous loss of the Battle of Annab in 1149, which resulted in the capture of King Louis VII and the loss of much of the Crusader army. While the Christians and Muslims were fighting, the Hindus in the Khmer Empire, under King Suryavarman II, built a fantastic temple for the Hindu god Vishnu called the Angkor Wat. Vishnu is an important god in Hinduism, known as the preserver and protector of the universe. He has 10 incarnations, or avatars, and is often depicted as having blue skin and holding 4 objects. As you approach Angkor Wat, you are greeted by a massive moat and a grand entrance gate adorned with intricate carvings of mythological creatures and deities. The main temple rises like a towering mountain, with intricate carvings and reliefs that tell the stories of Hindu mythology and the history of the Khmer Empire. The temple's galleries are lined with stunning bas-reliefs depicting scenes of battles, ceremonies, and daily life in ancient Cambodia. At the heart of the complex is the central sanctuary, a massive pyramid-like structure surrounded by smaller temples and courtyards. The sanctuary is considered the most sacred part of the temple, adorned with intricately carved statues and images of Hindu gods and goddesses. It was an incredible feat of human ingenuity. But yet in 1187, the Muslim commander from Egypt, Saladin, became fed up with the Christian rule of Jerusalem. So he declared a holy war across the Muslim world in order to reconquer Jerusalem from the Christians. The battle occurred on a scorching hot day in the hills near the Sea of Galilee. Saladin's forces numbered around 20,000. The Crusaders had a much smaller force of around 12,000 knights, soldiers, and civilians under the aptly named King Guy. The battle began with skirmishes between the two sides, but soon escalated into a full-scale engagement. Saladin's forces could use their superior cavalry to encircle the Crusaders, who could not break through the Muslim lines. The heat and thirst soon took a toll on the Crusaders, who were weakened and disoriented. The Muslim forces took advantage of the situation. They launched a fierce attack, breaking through the Crusader lines and capturing many knights. King Guy and a small group of knights were able to escape the battlefield. Still, the majority of the Crusader army was destroyed. The loss of the battle was a severe blow to the Christian forces in the region, and it paved the way for Saladin's conquest of Jerusalem. But the Christians weren't going to allow that, so guess what happened? Another crusade. This time, the three most powerful monarchs at the time, Emperor Frederick I of the Holy Roman Empire, King Richard I of England, and King Philip II of France, sent their best armies to reconquer the holy city of Jerusalem. However, all the force in the world couldn't retake Jerusalem from the grips of Saladin, leaving the Third Crusade to be a failure. Genghis was born to a mother kidnapped by his father and forced into marriage. Legend holds that he came into this world clutching a blood clot in his right hand. Before he turned 10, his father was poisoned to death by an enemy clan. Genghis's clan then deserted him, his mother, and his 6 siblings to avoid having to feed them. However, he soon began to make friends with the other clans throughout the Mongolian mountainside. By 1206, he had united all the various tribes, uniting 1 million people. For the time, Genghis was quite progressive. He made it illegal to sell and kidnap women, banished the idea of enslavement of any Mongol, and even allowed freedom of religion. When it came to war, though, Genghis was as barbaric as the next one. His first campaign was against the Shisha kingdom in 1209. His army of mostly cavalrymen on horses quickly outnumbered and destroyed the kingdom. His next target was the Jin dynasty in China. From 1211 to 1214, the outnumbered Mongols ravaged the countryside, causing food shortages, resulting in the Jin army killing tens of thousands of their own peasants just so their elites could live. In 1214, the Mongols besieged the capital of Zhongdu, now Beijing, and burnt it to the ground. In the early 13th century, King John was facing increasing pressure from his barons, who were demanding greater rights and protections under the law. In response to their demands, John agreed to meet with the barons and negotiate a settlement. The result of these negotiations was the Magna Carta, a document that set out a series of rights and freedoms that the king could not violate. Among these rights were the right to a fair trial, the right to due process of law, and the right to be protected from arbitrary arrest and imprisonment. The Magna Carta also established the principle of habeas corpus, which required the government to produce a prisoner in court and provide a lawful reason for their detention. This principle has been a cornerstone of modern legal systems around the world.